Well, hello. Guess what? We are back for another edition of Becoming a Gibborim. I haven't put out a dedicated Becoming a Gibborim in a while, but this last week I fired off an episode called For the Slaughter, in which I dealt with a mighty Gibborim's prayer named Hezekiah. He was a mighty man. I guess a Gibbor is the proper way to say it. He was a mighty, valiant king, and Hezekiah's prayer in 2 Kings 18, 19, maybe 19, was without question one of the most powerful weapons ever fired off by a single individual. That was such an astoundingly intense slaughtering event that took place because of that king's prayer that it was profoundly earth-shaking. Literally, I'm pretty sure the earth was shaking because an angel of Yahuwah showed up with a sword, basically, and slaughtered 185,000 Assyrians in one night, which equates to more or less 385 humans dying every minute for an entire night. That's intense. But you know what? Today, I'm going to read about another Gibbor everybody knows about all the time. But it's actually David, King David's greatest destruction. Everybody knows King David had his, mishaps. Everybody's like, yeah, Bathsheba, that moment where David was taken in temptation and lured by a woman bathing. It's a very well-known, talked-about case. But honestly, it's not David's biggest whoops. That's up there. Personally, that was a big mistake of David's. But we're going to read about another time where David makes a choice and a decision that was so catastrophically bad that tens of thousands of human beings are going to die because of it. And an angel of Yahuwah is personally going to see to the destruction of Israel. So, today, I'm going all over the place, guys, because sometimes study time with Nathan just goes off in these crazy directions that nobody expects, including myself. And this was one of those nights, so much so that I even took notes. See, I scrawled them on this tiny piece of paper that my child was playing with. Because you know what? The pen is so much mightier than the sword. Yes, we're going to talk about swords because David is so scared of a sword during this story that he literally can't go into a place. And that's awesome. Nobody really talks about how David was afraid of swords, but David was also very mighty with this. So we're going to get there. Okay, hang in there, guys. I'm all hopped up on enthusiasm and Uznia. If you didn't know it, drink Uznia. Let's see. Oh, I'm spilling on my Bible. Uznia. Oh, I just spilled all over my Bible. Dadgummit. Don't worry, I'm wearing linen. It dries almost instantaneously. Everything else. Okay, Uznia. It's a lichen algae-like thing that grows on the bottom of moist trees. It's got like a bungee cord effect, but when I drink it, it's absolutely spectacular. Naomi and I go on treasure quest to hunt it out every chance we get. I recommend straining the Uznia out before you drink it. Otherwise, it's like drinking an old man's beard inside your tea. It's delicious, granted. The old man who'd been dipping his beard in honey or something, maybe. But Aaron's beard running over with oil and honey. That's a blessing. Check this out. You ready for this? I'm going to dive in because otherwise I'm going to get real distracted. Hang in there, guys. It's late. I'm super debilitated. My feet are broken in seriously bad ways. Legitimately. I'm in braces, both feet. Bad news. But I'm persevering because living dangerously sometimes has a serious cost, like your feet. Oof, it's been savage. I'm exhausted beyond measure. It's taken a long time to just find a place to sleep. But here I am. So let's go. Mighty Gibborims, right? Let's go. Now, this is, by the way, Scripture translation. It's saucy. I recommend it. Check it out. But it's got Hebrew words in it where normal English-like words used to be. So if I wreck words and names, be gracious, y'all. Be kind, considerate, loving. Fruits of the Spirit. Check this out. This is 1 Chronicles 21. It's going to start out with a doozy. And the adversary, Hasatan, Satan, the dragon, stood up against Yasharel and moved David to number Israel. What? Check this out. Satan, the adversary, personally comes against David. Now, the word it says here is moved. You guys can't even really see that. It says moved, which is like enticed or seduced David. He basically enticed David to do something which was forbidden, not commanded for him to do, which was to number his people, to count and to figure out basically how many people were in his army or could be in his army if he wanted to. Now, this is a really interesting word because another time we see this word show up, you ready? Reference my paper, Deuteronomy 13:6. Check this out. This is crazy, guys. The Bible is like a real history book. I know sometimes we forget that because we've been raised by liars who made us think that, like, slime and monkeys made human beings creative and enough to draw stick figures on cave dwellings for 6 million years before we figured out pens. Lies. But you know what's amazing? People were actually way savvier and smarter than we were. No, I'm serious. Like, they were way more dialed into natural things because they ate real bread. Fundamentals. They ate real bread. They drank water, and they wore real clothing. It was staggering. It made them brilliant because they had nutrition, all of it. So much of it that it ran through their brain because they didn't stare at black mirrors all the time. Turn off your mirror. Even now, you can do that. Anyways, I get distracted. Deuteronomy 13. You ready for this? This is literally the other time we talk about enticing and seducing. Check this out. This is Deuteronomy 13:6. When your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is your own being, entices you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other mighty ones, other Elohim, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers. Do not agree with him, or listen to him, nor shall I pardon him, nor spare him, nor conceal him, but you shall certainly kill him. Your hand is first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. You ready for this? You're not supposed to give in to the seducers. But you know what? Unfortunately, David does, and it's about to bring some serious consequences. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You ready for this? Remember, this is the mighty king of David, the man after Yahweh's own heart. Check this out. And David said to Joab, and to the rulers of the people, go and number Yasharel from Beersheba to Dan, and bring the number of them to me so that I know it. And Joab answered, Yahuwah does add to his people 100 times more than they are. Joab basically just said, Yahuwah personally adds 100 times as much to all of the armies of Israel in the field. Meaning you could have one Yahuwah and 100 times less humans. It ain't even a thing. That's important. Joab understands that because he's been the commander of David's armies since they were in the wilderness running for their lives from Saul, who was seeking every day of his life to murder David. And the father delivered them continually. Anyways, check this out. Joab knows this is a bad idea. Why does my master seek to do this? Why should he be a cause of guilt in Yasharel? But the sovereign's word was strong against Joab. And Joab left and went throughout all of Yasharel and came to Jerusalem. And Joab gave the sum of the number of the people to David. And all of Israel had 1,100,000 men who drew the sword. Yes. And Yehuda, 470,000 men who drew the sword. But he did not number the Levites or Benjamin among them, for the sovereign's word was loathsome, dreadful, terrible to Joab. And it was evil in the eyes of Elohim concerning this matter. And he, Elohim, struck Yasharel. Then David said to Elohim, I have sinned greatly because I have done this matter. But now, I pray, take away the crookedness of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. And Yahuwah spoke to God, G-A-D, David's seer. It's like David's personal prophet, the prophet of David. Go, and you shall speak to David, saying, thus said Yahuwah, I hold 3 options before you. Choose one of them for yourself, and I do it to you. So Gad came to David and said to yourself, thus said Yahuwah, choose for yourself either 3 years of scarcity of food, 3 new moons to be defeated by your foes with the sword of your enemies, or else for 3 days the sword of Yahuwah, even the plague in the land with the messenger of Yahuwah, destroying throughout all the borders of Yasharel. And now consider what answer I am to return to him who sent me. And David said to Gad, I am in great trouble. Please let me fall into the hand of Yahuwah, for his compassion is very great. But do not let me fall into the hand of a man. Why, first of all, Why are these the options that David's given as punishment for this sin? Guess what? It's because it's what Yahuwah said would happen. You ready for this? Reference my tiny note card. Check this out. Leviticus 26. You guys ever read Leviticus? You actually ever read it? I get a lot of people that mock the book of Leviticus and Numbers more than almost any other books in the Bible. It's kind of interesting that they make jabs at two books that were kind of some of the most foundational, as in they're the roots of our faith books. Leviticus is super important because here's King David, the most awesome Gibbor ever, right? David is referenced, was it 900 times? Dadgummit, I forgot the verse count. The amount of times David is referenced in the scriptures is intense. From here, the first time I think he's ever mentioned is in 1 Samuel, all the way to Revelation 21. Like to the very last chapter, David's in it. He's like the center point of so much of the awesomeness of our lives and the prophecies of to come. And yet, here's David about to suffer a serious consequence because of a commandment written in Leviticus. You ready for this? Here's Leviticus 26. Is that right? My handwriting's pretty atrocious when I get excited. I'm serious, guys. I have so much Uzni in my body right now, I can barely hold my pen still, which is great. Okay? I'm just going to read a chapter of Leviticus because it's good for your soul. Check this out. Do not make idols for yourselves, and do not set up a carved image or a pillar for yourselves, and do not place a stone image in your land to bow down to it, for I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Guard my Sabbaths and reverence my set-apart place, for I am Yahuwah. If you walk in my ways and guard my commands and shall do them, then I shall give you rain in its season, and the land shall yield its crops, and the trees of the field yield their fruit. And your threshing shall last till the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last till the time of sowing, and you shall eat your bread until you have enough, and shall dwell in your land safely. And I shall give you peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and no one will make you afraid. I shall clear the land of evil beasts, and not let the sword go through your land. And you shall pursue your enemies, and they shall fall by the sword before you. And the 5 of you shall pursue 100, and 100 of you shall pursue 10,000. And your enemies shall fall by the sword before you. And I shall turn to you and make you fruitful, and shall increase you, and shall establish my covenant with you. And you shall eat the old supply, and clear out the old because of the new. And I shall set my dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. And I shall walk in your midst, and shall be your Elohim, and you shall be my people. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, from your being their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke and have made you walk upright. But if you do not obey me and do not do all these commands, and if you reject my laws, and if your being loathes, dreads my right rulings, so that you do not do my commandments, but break my covenant, I also shall do this to you. I shall appoint sudden panic, alarm, anxiety over you, wasting diseases, inflammations, destroying of your eyes, consuming your life, and you shall sow your seeds in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. And I shall set my face against you, and you shall be smitten before your enemies, and those who hate you shall rule over you, and you shall flee when no one pursues you. And after all this, if you do not obey me, then I shall punish you 7 times more for your sins. And I shall break the pride of your power, and shall make your heavens like iron, and your earth like bronze. And your strength shall be spent in vain, and the land shall yield its crops no more, nor the trees of the land shall yield their fruit. And if you walk contrary, perversely, twisted, like the adversary. Guys, the adversary, like the devil or the dragon, like what his name means, Hasatan, it means perverse, corrupt. Like goats, here's why. People talk about Azazel. They had, if you didn't know it, the Day of Atonement, really big deal. They would have a goat, actually 2. One goat, all the sins of Yasharel, Israel, were placed upon one of these goats. One of the other goats was a scapegoat, was ransomed, was set free. That goat that was set free was spared, was driven away with all of the sins, but not one of the goats was sacrificed. One of the goats was set free. All the sins were placed upon it. And it was taken by the hands of a man, a shepherd, and driven into the wilderness 3 days' journey. And it was sent out into the wilderness to go to an entity called Azazel. This is in the Bible. You can read it. Azazel. It's like the goat-headed god, kind of. A lot of people will reference Pan or a satyr. Okay? This is where those kind of get intermingled. The goats, if you didn't know it, the Father made me a shepherd of goats for a long time. Savage, super difficult, really lovely milk. Difficult because goats are perverse. I mean it. They walk not in straight lines. They don't cut straight paths when they walk. When you walk a goat into like a new pasture, it'll walk around and just graze like haphazardly and try to sample all of the food around it. It won't just like eat in a row. Like, you ever seen cows or sheep kind of grazing? They almost graze like in a line and clear the food out. They clear that, like, especially if it's like lush teenage grass, it's their favorite. They'll like eat almost like a lawnmower kind of in an order, not precise, but pretty precise way. Goats literally eat like this. They'll climb a tree over here, eat a couple leaves off of it, come down, eat a couple little vines over here, briars. They'll just chew everywhere haphazardly. And they make paths in mountains and in forests that make no sense. Like, there was a book, I'm not gonna go down that road. Goats basically are perverse. The adversary creates perversion. He gets us out of the narrow walk we're supposed to be on. David was on a walk as the king of Yasharel, and the adversary rose up to try to hijack that, to perverse it, to make it corrupt, so that now David's route was bent, okay? This is what he means by these instructions that he's warning us on right here, is that his way is going to get corrupted. Instead of being on the journey you're supposed to be on, now it's suddenly taking a 90-degree turn, and you're lost in the middle of nowhere, okay? Let's see, where was I? Oh, Leviticus 26. Anyways, the reason I say that, guys, is because we're supposed to be like sheep, not like the goats. Goats also jump out of the fence. Stay in the fence. I did a whole video on this called Sheep versus Goats. Go check it out if you want to know more. Now, and if you walk contrary to me and refuse to obey me, I shall bring on you 7 times more plagues according to your sins, and send wild beasts among you, which shall bereave you of your children. That means he sends wild beasts to kill your children. Think about that. Shark attack, anybody? And I shall cut off your livestock, and make you few in number, and your highways shall be deserted. And if you are not instructed by me by these, but walk contrary to me, then I shall also walk contrary to you, and I myself shall strike you 7 times for your sins. And I shall bring against you a sword, executing the vengeance of my covenant. And you shall gather together in your cities, and I shall send pestilence among you, and you shall be given into the hand of your enemy. When I have cut off your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall bring back to you your bread by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. And in spite of this, you do not obey me, but walk contrary to me, then I shall walk contrary to you in my wrath, and I myself shall punish you 7 times for your sins. 3rd time he said it. And you shall eat the flesh of your sons. It's cannibalism, he's saying. You guys will be cannibals. And you shall eat the flesh of your daughters. And I shall destroy your high places, and cut down your obelisks, sun pillars, and put your carcasses on the carcasses of your idols. That's what the Washington Monument is, guys, if you didn't know that. Super long rabbit trail I could go into forever. Look up obelisks. The steeples on the top of a Baptist church is also an obelisk. Latter-day Saints church, obelisks, sun worship, sun pillars. Big, big no-no. Don't do it, because he personally takes offense to it, because it is worshiping Elohim Achrim, other gods. He's specifically saying this. My being shall loathe you, and I shall turn your cities into ruins, and lay your set-apart places wasted, and not smell your sweet fragrances. And I shall lay the land waste, and your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. And I shall scatter you among the nations, and draw out a sword. Draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be a desert, and your cities ruin. And the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths, as long as it lies waste, and you are in your enemy's land. Then the land would rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies waste, it rests, for the time it did not rest on your Sabbaths, when you dwelt in it. As for those of you who are left, the remnant, I shall send faintness into their hearts in the land of their enemies, and the sound of a shaken leaf shall cause them to flee. And they shall flee as though retreating from a sword. A lot of sword talk. And they shall fall when no one pursues. And they shall stumble over one another as from before a sword when no one pursues. And you shall be unable to stand before your enemies. And you shall perish among the nations. And the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And those of you who are left rot away in their crookedness in your enemies' lands, and also in their fathers' crookedness rot away with them. But if they confess their crookedness and the crookedness of their fathers with their trespass in which they trespassed against me, and they also have walked contrary to me, and that I have walked contrary to them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if their uncircumcised heart is then humbled. He said, if your heart is humbled, if your heart is humbled, and they accept the punishment of their crookedness, then I shall remember my covenant with Yaakov, and also my covenant with Isaac, and remember my covenant with Abraham, and remember the land. For the land was abandoned by them, and enjoying its Sabbath while lying waste without them. And they were paying for their crookedness, because they rejected my right rulings, and because their beings loathed my laws. And yet for all this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I shall not reject them, nor shall I loathe them, so as to destroy them and break my covenant with them, for I am Yahuwah, their Elohim. Then I shall remember for their sake the covenant of their ancestors, whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim before the eyes of the nation, to be their Elohim. I am Yahuwah. These are the laws and the right rulings and the Torah which Yahuwah made between himself and the children of Yasharel on Mount Sinai by the hand of Moshe. That is why David gets 3 options. David confessed his sin very rapidly, guys. Just like when David screwed up with Bathsheba and he sent Nathan the prophet to tell him, bro, you screwed up bad. He said, surely I have sinned against Yahweh. He confessed his sin quickly. But you know what David also had to own? The consequences. The consequences of David's sin with Bathsheba. His son died. The firstborn son of David by the womb of Bathsheba died because of his sin. His sins of his fathers killed that baby. Second son that was born by David, King Solomon. Everybody likes to say the wisest man who ever lived. The man who destroyed Israel and got it to worship all these other Elohim, and whose sons scattered and split the houses. Terrible tragedies came from Solomon. Solomon's the one who raised up all these high places and the sun pillars and made people worship these other Elohim, these strange gods. He's the reason they did that, because Solomon delved into the wisdom's gnosis. He sought knowledge. He became the master magician. Horrible stuff came through Solomon, guys. I want to contrast, I really will do a series on the Werewolf King, which contrasts Solomon to Nebuchadnezzar, and why Nebuchadnezzar, in so many ways, was wiser than Solomon. No, I'm serious. I'll get there. Anyways, and they turned him into a werewolf. Watchers personally cursed him. I can't get there. I get too excited about this stuff. Anyways, let's dive back into our story where David was at. David had to choose between those 3 options because these are the commandments and they're unbreakable. Oh, all right, let's keep going. And David said to Gad, I am in great trouble. Please let me fall into the hand of Yahuwah, for his compassion is very great. But do not let me fall into the hand of man. And Yahuwah sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell. And Elohim sent a messenger to Jerusalem to destroy it. And as he was destroying, Yahuwah saw and relented about the evil, and said to the messenger who was destroying, enough, now stop your hand. And the messenger of Yahuwah was standing by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. You see that? David was wise to choose the sword of Yahuwah to be the thing that executed judgment because he knew that Yahuwah was compassionate. David knew the Torah. He knew the instructions. He knew Leviticus 26, that he said, I will have compassion on you, remember? And there you see it, he did. But you know what? If Yahuwah raised up another Assyrian king, that king may not have had compassion on Jerusalem when it got there. That king may have had too much pride at stake to stop the slaughter and may have sacked the whole city. But David was wise to choose a punishment that was directed by the hand of the Father. David lifted up his eyes and saw the messenger, the angel, of Yahuwah, standing between the earth and the heavens, having in his hand a drawn sword. And David stretched out, and in his hand a drawn sword stretched out over Jerusalem. And David and the elders wrapped it in sackcloth and fell on their faces. And David said to Elohim, was it not I who commanded the people to be numbered? Am I the one who has sinned and done evil indeed? But these, the sheep, what have they done? Let your hand, I pray, O Yahuwah, my Elohim, be against me and my father's house, but not against your people to be plagued. And the messenger of Yahuwah commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up to raise a slaughter place to Yahuwah on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So David went up at the word of Gad, which he had spoken in the name of Yahuwah. And Ornan turned and saw the messenger and his 4 sons with him, hiding themselves. And Ornan was threshing wheat. And David came to Ornan, and Ornan looked and saw David, and he went out from the threshing floor and bowed down to David with his face to the ground. And David said to Ornan, give me the site of the threshing floor, so that I may build a slaughter place to Yahuwah on it. Give it to me at the complete price, so that the plague is restrained from the people. And Ornan said to David, take it for yourself, and let my master the sovereign do what is good in his eyes. See, I shall give you the cattle for ascending offerings, the threshing implements for wood, and the wheat for the grain offering. I give it all. And so the sovereign said to Ornan, no, but I shall certainly buy it at the complete price, for I do not take what is yours for Yahuwah, nor will I offer an ascending offering without cost. Even here, in the midst of this time, David has a man here, Ornan, offering to just give him the place to do the sacrifice. And David says, no, I must give an offering to Yahuwah that comes at a cost. David knows it comes at a price. Sacrificing to Yahuwah comes at a cost. And if David was to just receive this gift blindly, he knows it's not the same as a sacrifice. And David's going to sacrifice to Yahuwah because David has done wrong. And David wishes to make it right, make amends. He wishes to try to see the bridge be rebuilt that he had torn down by him casting off the commands of the Father. He wants to see his way be made upright again. And so he's going to sacrifice to his Elohim. And David gave Ornan 600 shekels of gold by weight for the place. And David built there a slaughtering place to Yahuwah, and offered ascending offerings and peace offerings, and called on Yahuwah. And he answered him from the heavens by fire on the slaughter place of the ascending offering. Then Yahuwah commanded the messenger, and he returned its sword to its sheath. This is so important, guys. The only one who can command the angel of Yahuwah to put his sword back into its sheath is Yahuwah. And it's so important, guys. When a warrior draws his sword out of its sheath because he's been commanded to, the only one who can get that same warrior to put his sheath back is not the warrior. Do you know why? Because bloodlust is serious. And when you get drunk on the blood of men, when you drink the blood of men, because you have been a brother of the blade, when you are someone who's carried this sword, when you're someone who has been drawing this out and being vengeance dealt out by the hand of Yahuwah, nothing will stop that except for the very hand of the captain of the heavenly hosts. The commander of the heavenly hosts is the one who says, stop, put that sword in its sheath. That's it. That's it, guys. I studied battle forever, guys. forever. And you know where I started my studies? Right here in the scriptures. If you guys want to learn the ways of war, if you want to learn the ways of battle, learn this book. Read it. It will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about warfare. Everything you ever needed to know comes from not just studying these kinds of swords, guys. This is the living sword. I call this the sword of the covenant because from beginning to end, it is all about swords and it's all about covenants, you guys. And this is the sharpest of all the swords. And if it's not, this is not ingrained into you, if you don't want to know what is in this book, it's because there's other things that are perverse in you, that want other stuff. They want the Elohims of the world. They want their stuff. You are more fascinated by them. And I've been guilty of this for decades of my life, you guys. But I had to vomit their words out of my mouth so that every time I opened my mouth, I didn't just talk about what was on their minds, that I wasn't just another goat in their world. David has offerings of praise that come out of his mouth. David, it says, is it in Proverbs? In the account, sorry, in Kings, when it's talking about Solomon, that Solomon had 3,000 Proverbs, 3,000 Proverbs and like 150 Psalms. Like those are the words that came out of Solomon that were life. Those were the words that came out with blessings and with wisdom and knowledge and understanding. But Solomon also has some of the most corrupt, occulted information. If any of these books that have been handed down to us, these occult books that come from Solomon, which most master masons and all of these occultists claim, the seals of Solomon and commanding demons, people that study witchcraft and sorcery and divination, they study the other writings of Solomon, you guys, because he had another set of texts that came out of him that were so perverse, so twisted, that it indoctrinated men to this day. I've had deliverance sessions with a lot of people personally that were possessed by demons that had been trying to chase the ways of Solomon. Not the biblical versions of Solomon that we need, because that guy got perverted, corrupted. But David repented. He repented quickly because you know why? This isn't the first time David's had massive destruction come into Israel. Here's another time. Yahuwah rose up and personally judged Israel another time, guys, and it was because of bloodshed. Again, ready for this? 1 Samuel. Oh, sorry, 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel 21. And there was scarcity of food in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David sought the face of Yahuwah. And Yahuwah answered and said, because David wants to know why. Why is there no food? Why have we had 3 years of famine? And he finds out. Yahuwah says, because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites. Guys, if you don't know who the Gibeonites are, we got to go back to Joshua 9. You ready? Joshua. By the way, this is where the commander of the heavenly hosts gives personal marching orders to Joshua, or Yahusha, or Yahushua. His name's a little fuzzy here. Yahusha. Joshua's name, or Yeshua, his name is changed to Yahusha by Moses at a very pivotal time in his life. It's pretty powerful, man. And it came to be when this is Joshua 9, where you find out about the Gibeonites. This is saucy. Hang in there, guys. This is so worth it. Trust me. I'm about to build some saucy bridges. Ready? And it came to be when all the sovereigns who were beyond the Jordan, in the hills and in the low country, and in all the coasts of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites heard, they gathered together to fight with Yahusha and Israel with one accord. Israel is about to go into the land, the promised land, to slaughter everybody. They just took out Jericho and they slaughtered Ai, okay? All the people that are in the surrounding area are like, dadgummit, we're all gonna die. How about we all try to group together this next time to kill Israel? Shall we? Sure. But one of the people that's in the area, they have a different idea. They think, probably not gonna win against an army that blew shofars and brought down the most powerful walled city in the entire land. Maybe we should figure out a different strategy. Welcome to cunningness. Check this out. You ever hear of a verse that said, be shrewd or cunning as a serpent, but innocent as doves? You're about to see cunning as a serpent in action. You ready for this? And the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Yahusha had done to Jericho and Ai, and they acted slyly, cunningly. and went and pretended to be envoys. And they took old sacks on their donkeys, and old wineskins torn and mended, and old and patched sandals on their feet, and old garments on themselves. And all the bread of their provisions was dry. It was crumbs. And they went to Yahusha, to the camp at Gilgal, and said to him and to the men of Yasharel, "We have come from a far land, and now make a covenant with us." But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "It could be that you dwell in our midst, so how could we make a covenant with you?" And they said to Yahusha, "We are your servants." And Yahusha said to them, "Who are you, and where do you come from?" So they said to him, "From a land very far off your servants have come, because of the name of Yahuwah your Elohim. For we have heard the report of him, and all that he did in Mitzrayim, and all that he had done to the two sovereigns of the Amorites, who are beyond the Jordan, to Sihon the sovereign of Heshbon, and Og the sovereign of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our land spoke to us, saying, 'Take food with you for your journey, and go and meet them, and say to them, we are your servants, and now make a covenant with us. This bread of ours we took hot for our provisions from our houses on the day that we left to come to you. But now see, it is dry and it's crumbly. And these wineskins which we have filled were new, and see, they are torn. And these our garments, and our sandals have become old because of the very long journey.' And the men of Yasharel took some of their food, but they did not ask the mouth of Yahuwah. And Yahshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live. And the rulers of the congregation swore to them. And it came to be at the end of 3 days, and after they made a covenant with them, that they heard that they were their neighbors who dwelt near them. And the children of Yasharel set out and came to their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Keraphah, Berothov, Kiriath Yarim. But the children of Yasharel did not strike them, because the rulers of the congregation had sworn to them by Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yasharel, and all the congregation grumbled against the rulers. But all the rulers said to all the congregation, "We have sworn to them by Yahuwah Elohim of Yasharel, and we are unable to touch them now. So let us do this to them. We shall keep them alive, lest wrath be upon us because of the oath which we swore to them." David and all of Israel, hundreds of years later, are going to incur the wrath of Yahuwah because of the oath that Joshua, swore to them. Because of that oath, hundreds of years later, when it was disregarded, meaning no longer cared about, nobody cared about this oath, Saul, the bloodthirsty murderers of Saul's camp, Doeg the Edomite, you're going to hear about this in a second, disregarded this oath of Joshua, and because of that, they're going to incur the wrath. And the ruler said, "Let them live," the Gibeonites, "but let them be woodcutters and drawers of water for all the congregation as the rulers had promised them." Then Yahusha called for them, and he spoke to them, saying, "Why have you deceived us? We are very far from you, yet you are dwelling in our midst. And now you are cursed, and you shall not cease from being slaves and woodcutters and drawers of water for the house of my Elohim." Yahusha, says they're going to be woodcutters and drawers of water for the service of the tabernacle, the temple, meaning they're going to work alongside the Levites from this day forward, because it's a lot of wood to burn all the sacrifices and to keep fires going all the time. So much wood cutting, so much water drawing, a lot of mikvahs, guys, baptisms, baths, a lot of water baths, a lot of water required, okay? This is all what's being used up right here. They just got the whole army that's going to be used for these tasks, right? And they answered, the Gibeonites answered Yahusha and said, "Your servants were clearly told that Yahuwah your Elohim commanded his servant Moshe to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. So we were very much afraid for our lives because of you and have done this deed. And now see, we are in your hands. Do with us as it seems good and right to do to us." And he did so to them and delivered them out of the hand of the children of Yasharel, and they did not kill them. And that day Yahusha made them woodcutters and drawers of water for the congregation and for the slaughter place of Yahuwah, even to this day, at the place that he would choose. So the Gibeonites acted shrewdly, cunningly, okay? They acted cunningly. And that made me think of a parable from this time that Yahusha, Jesus, interesting that his name is very similar, guys. Kind of an English way of saying Jesus would be Yahshua or Joshua. Really, Joshua would be the English closer transliteration. It's a whole other big, long story. I'm trying to study into all this stuff, guys. I need your patience and your wherewithal to just bear with me as I study it out too. But I'm trying to study the language of my father, because the language of my earthly father was this: exploitation, murdering, rampage, incest, violence, hatred, and murder. So I'm trying to steer away from the bloodthirsty path of my father, carnal father, and steer instead onto the path of my sword-bearing father of redemption and sword of the covenant guy, right? But check this out. Luke 16. There's a crazy parable. I'm going to read it to you guys because it's always been one that perplexed me. And I think this is the first time I've ever recognized why it's in here, okay? This is a strange story, and it's fit between two other parables that are all dealing with stewardship. Basically, how you manage what you've been entrusted, okay? Which, yeah, there's going to be a lot of parallels. Anyways, you ready for this? This is Luke 16, okay? And he, Yeshua said, also said to his taught ones, there was a certain rich man who had a manager, and he was accused to him as wasting his possessions. So having called him, he said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, for you are no longer able to be manager. And the manager said within himself, what shall I do? For my master is taking the managership away from me, and I'm unable to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, that when I am removed from the managership, they might receive me into their houses, and calling every one of his master's debtor to him. These are people that owed his master money and stuff. You ready? He said to the first one, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, take your bill, sit down and quickly write 50. Then to another he said, how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. And the master who hired this shrewd manager praised the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. Because the sons of this age are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they shall receive you into everlasting dwellings. He who is trustworthy in what is least is trustworthy also in much, and he who is unrighteous in what is least is unrighteous also in much. If, therefore, you have not been trustworthy in the unrighteous mammon, who shall entrust to you the true? And if you have not been trustworthy in what is another man's, who shall give you what is your own? No servant is able to serve two masters, for he shall either hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cling to one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and Mammon. Mammon is like the entity over money. And the Pharisees who loved silver, Mammon, also heard this and were sneering at him. And he said to him, you are those who declare yourselves righteous before men, but Elohim knows your hearts, because what is highly thought of among men is an abomination in the sight of Elohim. This is a shrewd manager, guys. This guy was shrewd. The Gibeonites were shrewd. Now get this, though. They were also not doing the right thing, like lying. You see this? This is a conundrum. I did an episode called The Corundum Conundrum, where I was faced with the issue of recognizing that gemstones, for some reason I don't have a gemstone in reach, gemstones are a price-skewed, crazy monopoly. Not just some gemstones, all of them, like sapphires. They're as common as dirt almost in some places, like legitimately. dozens of tons of this stuff come out of the ground in some of these places and make them almost not worth anything. Super clear, crystal, crazy, you know, mind-controlled, good-looking crystals, diamonds, and sapphires are really expensive. But not really, guys. Like, they're everywhere. They're abundant. Because there's shrewdness that's being deployed against us to make us think something is valuable when it's not really precious. This whole world system, this world of mammon, has made us think of things. He's skewed things that are precious to make us think this is precious, but this is not. The things that ought to be valued highly are disregarded by men who are under the influence of mammon. And instead, the things of mammon's kingdom, the things of the deceivers, massive industrial psychologists, people that make us think something's valuable, that we need to give our mind, our will, our attention, our souls to it, to have it. Those people have enticed us to do wickedly, to be poor stewards of the things that matter most, like our time, who we worship, what we give our time, our energy, our attention to, what we safeguard. Do we treasure and value this above all else? Do we safeguard the commands, the instructions, the words of our Father? Do we treasure them? Do we regard them? Or do we disregard them and cast them off? Saul, you ready for this? You know when Saul murdered the Gibeonites, guys? Saul was so bloodthirsty to kill David that he killed the Gibeonites along with all the priests of Yahuwah. This was when Saul disregarded the instructions of the Father. Well, a lot more early on, but this was when it was most noticeable. You ready for this? Let's check this out. This was back, I did an episode on this earlier in the series, guys, and you can chase it down. This is from 1 Samuel 22. David, when he was on the run, he ran to the priest's house in Adullam. Wait, from the cave of Adullam. In Gibeah, sitting under a tamarisk tree. Basically, here's the deal. Saul is hunting David every single day of his life. David is like the #1 most wanted man. He'd be on the FBI's #1 most wanted list, okay? He'd be like the #1 terrorist in the world kind of guy at this point in his life. Saul, the king of Israel, is determined to kill him. David, when he runs from his house and he bugs out, oh yeah, escape and evade episode maybe, soon after that, in Becoming a Gibborim series. He runs out of his house almost naked in the night, probably only wearing linen because he's a champion, remember? He runs out. He doesn't even have a sword. So he runs to the house of Yahuwah, where the priests live, okay? It's a town, what's it called? I don't remember the town's name, and I can't scan this passage fast enough to find it. Nob, maybe. Okay, he finds out that the priest there gave David the sword of Goliath because he didn't kill Goliath with just a stone. He cut Goliath's head off with Goliath's own sword. David kept that sword in his tent, and then he dedicated it to Yahuwah because it's a wise thing to dedicate your sword to Yahuwah, remember? Then if Yahuwah wants you to pick it up again, you can do it. The priest there, Abiathar, yeah. Abiathar, Ahimelech and Ahitub. They basically gave David some bread, the showbread, which is crazy awesome thinking about showbread. They gave him bread, they gave him a sword, and they sent him on his journey. Well, when Saul learns about this, a guy named Doeg the Edomite, who is the king's the shepherds of all the shepherds for Saul, tells Saul, hey, I know that the priests helped David out. So Saul brings the priests in to talk to them. Those priests end up confessing, yeah, I gave him the bread and a sword because he told me you were on a mission, or he was on a mission for you. Saul says, you know what? You conspired against the man who's trying to kill me. So because of that, you're all going to die. So Doeg the Edomite kills the priests and the priest family and everybody in the entire town where the temple of Yahuwah was at the time, which means the Gibeonites, guys, because remember the Gibeonites were there as the servants to the house of Yahuwah. So the Gibeonites get wiped out. All the priests of Yahuwah get wiped out except for one man. There's a lone survivor, and his name is Abiathar. He became the priest of Yahuwah because of this. This is astounding. This action here, now decades, maybe decades later, David is paying the penalty for it. All of Israel is paying the penalty for the bloodthirstiness of Saul because Saul disregarded the commandments. Okay? This was in 1 Samuel now 21. There was scarcity of food in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. So David sought the face of Yahuwah because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites. So David has to render the blood for blood. A bunch of the sons of Saul are going to have to die for the Gibeonites to be rendered vindication for what was done wrong to them, and that stops the plague. There is blood that has been spilled by so many of us, and it is by our fathers and our fathers before us, guys. That's iniquity, sins. We have disregarded the word of Yahweh for generations. Because of that, we are incurring the curse of Yahuwah. We are being oppressed. We are being oppressed. We have wasting diseases, inflammation, blindness. Our children are insane. These are literally the curses Yahweh said, if you disregard me, this is going to come upon your head. But if you confess these sins, if you confess the sins of your fathers, I will have compassion on you and spare you. And I will tell the destroyer to put his sword in its sheath, and he will obey him. And he will turn the blessings into those curses into blessings. And the enemy will run from you again. Where 5 of you will put 100 to flight, 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. And he will bless you when you go out and when you come in. Blessings of Deuteronomy 28. He will give you those, you guys. And this is what happened there. Ready for this? At that time, David saw that Yahuwah had answered him on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, and he slaughtered there. For the dwelling place of Yahuwah and the slaughter place of the ascending offering which Moshe had made in the wilderness were at that time at the high place in Gibeon. But David was unable to go before it to inquire of Elohim, for he was afraid of the sword of the messenger of Yahuwah. And you know what? We likewise should be afraid of the sword of the messengers of Yahuwah, because in one night, 185,000 of the enemies of Israel were killed by it. But on another night, 70,000 of Israel fell by the same sword, you guys. So we should inquire earnestly before our Father to intercede and say, have mercy on us. Read the prayer of Hezekiah. Intercede for us. And may Yahweh's name be praised. May we exalt him. May we live our lives in humble adoration of the one who loves us and cares about us. And he will give to us the promises that he has promised to each and every one of us. He has long life for us. He will lengthen our days. He will guard us and he will protect us. And when our ways are pleasing before him, he will make even our enemies to be at peace before us. I pray that you guys would be mighty for these days. You were made for them. We were made to live dangerously. You were made to not fear those other Elohim, but to walk humbly before our Creator, our King, and he will deliver us. He will be a vanguard of you. He will be a wall of fire about you, around, about, and above and below you, and he will be your champion and your rear guard. I pray that he would faithfully fulfill his every word in each and every one of your lives. I love you guys. Your prayers are dearly thanked. We need your prayers. My family could use them mightily. Pray for our family diligently, please. We most appreciate it. We love you guys. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for each of you that has stayed fast with our family all on our journeys. We love you guys. We appreciate all that you do for us and for the people that are out there. Be valiant always and courageous, even when faced with death. I'll talk to you soon.